Welcome to the LowCarb USA podcast, where we seek to inspire you to help us build this community. I'm Doug Reynolds.
And this is Pam Devine.
Okay, excellent. So Emily Fletcher, Rob Wolfe suggested that I speak to you, kind of off the beaten path, I suppose, from what we normally do, because we talk about metabolic health and lifestyle interventions, and particularly low carb and ketogenic diet interventions to address that. But I was talking with Rob, and he suggested, and I think maybe we can go into that a little bit later, but he suggested that I speak to you because he said it's changed his life. And meditation, I have to admit, I'm one of the skeptics. So I think
you're rare and rare these days.
Well, I mean, that's a good thing for those who are. I think this is what I'm hoping this podcast will do for our community, is open them up to this. I got your book, I read your book, and I'm getting convinced. But I have some questions, and I think other people would too. So I think this will be a fun talk.
Okay, beautiful. First of all, thanks for being so open. Thanks for getting the book and reading the book, even if you're skeptical. That says a lot about you. And I'm excited. Honestly, like when I started 10 years ago, everyone was skeptical, and so it's actually kind of fun for me to like have that conversation. So great.
Yeah, I know it's like for us when we started this whole keto diet education journey 5 years ago, and it was very unknown back then.
Yeah.
And now it's become like flavor of the month and stuff, but there's so much garbage out there now that our job's kind of migrating from trying to convince people about it to actually teaching them the right stuff, because there's so much misinformation out there.
Yeah, that's exactly where meditation is, it feels like, because now it's so popular, it's everywhere. So it's just giving people the education and the tools to know like what affects your brain in what ways.
Yeah. So maybe start out by telling the basic story of how you found this and how it changed your life, and the basics of what it is and why it's so important and why it's so effective. And then hopefully we can delve a little bit into my issues and why Rob even suggested that I speak to you.
Yeah. So I was on Broadway for 10 years, a very stressful position because I was understudying 3 roles. So basically you're in constant fight or flight. Long story short, I started having insomnia for 18 months. I couldn't sleep through the night. I was going gray in my 20s. I was getting sick and injured all the time, even though I was living my dream. And so I found meditation. It cured my insomnia on the first night. I didn't get sick for 8.5 years. I stopped going gray. I stopped getting injured. But the most profound change is that I started enjoying my job again. And so I just thought, why does everyone not do this? Left Broadway, went to India, started what became a 3-year training process to teach. And then since graduating, I've now taught 50,000 people to meditate. The book came out 2 years ago, has been translated into 14 languages. We created the world's first online meditation training, which was an experiment when we started. We didn't know if it was going to work. It was before Oprah Chopra, before Headspace. And now, 100 million people have downloaded either Calm or Headspace. And so now, like you were saying, my job has changed. I have moved from teaching skeptics the science of meditation, which it sounds like what we might be doing today, to now sort of elucidating the differences in how different styles of meditation will impact your brain differently, and sharing with high performers, which is generally who I teach, how to get the highest ROI. Like if you're going to invest your most valuable resource, which is your time, you better be getting a return on that investment. And so, it matters what style of meditation you do, and it matters the combination of practices. It matters when you practice. And so now it's about letting people know that, sure, you could download a free app on your phone, and that's a great start. That's like a delicious glass of water. But if you want to get in the ocean and remind yourself that you are God pretending to be human, that's where I come into play.
Yeah, cool. So, So maybe let's just look at the basics of what meditation is and why it is. I mean, I know in your book you kind of go into the neurology of it and explain why it is uh, that it is so effective. So maybe if you could just explain that for our listeners.
Sure. So you're right. So in the book, so the book is, I think, kind of just right on the nose, called Stress Less, Accomplish More.
Correct.
Because the reality is, if you're stressed all the time, which most of us are, stress makes us stupid, sick, and slow. And nobody really wants to be stupid, sick, and slow. And the thing is, most of us can't, it's like we can't see the label when we're in the jar. You can't see the water when you are the fish, swimming in it. And if there's just stress around us, stressy people all around us, it's hard to even know. We think it's normal. We have habituated and normalized what is really quite toxic and sometimes chronic levels of stress. According to Harvard Medical School, 90% of all doctors' visits are related to stress. And it weakens your immune system. So in the middle of a global pandemic, we all want to have a stronger immune system, regardless of what side of the aisle you sit on. It's like a strong immune system is, you can't really argue with that. And if you're stressed, then your immune system is going to be compromised. So anyway, in the book, the first third of the book is what I call the selfish reasons why to meditate. So there's a whole chapter on why meditation can give you better sex, better skin, reverse your body age, improve your immune function, help you to make more money, aka be more productive. So it's all the meeting people where they are. Like, how is this going to be worth my time investment? And then I go on to teach a simple technique, and then we talk about the ripple effect of that. Okay, how does you becoming better selfishly improve your family? How does that improve your town? How does that improve your, country, and then ultimately humanity itself? So some of the science around this is just, the simple science is, if you're stressed, your body is almost always in a chronic fight or flight reaction, which means that your body's going to be producing adrenaline and cortisol, which are stress hormones, which are acidic in nature. And as you well know, if your body's chronically acidic, then it's going to be chronically inflamed, and inflammation is the basis of all chronic disease, at least according to Ayurvedic medicine. So when you start meditating, not only do you get out of fight or flight, not only do you start to get rid of that adrenaline and cortisol, but you start to flood the brain and body with dopamine and serotonin. And those are bliss chemicals. So it feels nice, but they're also alkaline in nature. So you can start to change the pH of your body. You also, according to Tufts and Wake Forest, you can reverse your body age by somewhere between 8 to 15 years. And they're basing that on skin elasticity, brain elasticity, and telomere length. So telomeres, are like the little casing at the end of our DNA strands. And if we know that chronic stress will weaken and shorten the telomeres, which can basically allow the DNA to unravel, which will impact your body age and death date. As far as sleep goes, so I used to have chronic insomnia for about 18 months. First day of my first class, meditation cured my insomnia. I've slept through the night every night since. That was 12 years ago that I started. So with sleep, the deal is that if sleep is the most restful form of rest that you have, then your body has to use sleep as a time for stress release, because you're picking up stresses all day. Versus if you start to insert meditation into your day, then your brain and body can use meditation for stress release, which frees you up to use sleep as a time for sleep. So your sleep latency decreases, which means you fall asleep faster. The depth of your sleep is actually deeper, which usually means for most people that you need less of it. And then you wake up feeling refreshed and energized after maybe 6 or 7 hours, where you might have needed 8 or 9 before, and we're still waking up feeling exhausted, still feeling dependent on substances to bring you up in the morning, still feeling dependent on substances to bring you down at night. Whereas what I'm really aiming towards with my students is full self-sufficiency. And that includes in your meditation practice, meaning I don't want people to be dependent on an app in order to meditate, but I also want people to move towards enhancing their own internal pharmacy, right? So that we don't have to take antidepressants and SSRIs and anti-anxiety and caffeine and nicotine and marijuana and CBD and sleeping pills, and just all day we're medicating to modulate. Like, we have an internal pharmacy. Our brains and our bodies are incredibly intelligent machines. But if we're constantly living in stress and then not living in accordance with nature, then it's very hard for our internal pharmacy to work as it was designed.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So to go back to, I did a podcast interview with Rob Wolfe a couple of weeks ago, and we had finished the interview, and we were just kind of chatting afterwards, and I was talking to him about my problem with TBI, with traumatic brain injury. Like when I was about 22, I had a very severe motor car accident and pretty much almost died, and had a really bad brain injury. And back in those days, no one knew about TBI or anything. I was pretty much, I couldn't see for about 3 months. Wow. And I just couldn't focus. So my vision was completely blurred. If I looked with just one eye, then I could kind of focus. But when I looked with both eyes, they couldn't come to the same focal point. People told me it was like talking to a chameleon, like my eyes would move independently of each other. And, you know, that all got better and everything. But the one thing that really has been with me ever since has been short-term memory loss. People say, oh, that happened to me all the time. And then maybe, but it didn't happen to me. But like forgetting what I'm saying, like if I have the slightest little thought of something else, or, oh yeah, I need to talk about that later or something. It suddenly means like, I'll go blank. And sometimes if the people remind me what I was talking about, it'll come back, and sometimes it doesn't, it's just gone. And there's a lot to be said about, and a lot is being said about neurological effects for the ketogenic diet. So I found as a great side effect that I wasn't expecting when I started doing this, that my issues improved a lot, immensely, in fact. But I'm still injured, and it's not fixed. It's just better. And I was talking to Rob about this, and that was when he said, you need to speak to Emily. So I'd be interested to know from you whether you think that there could be improvements in this and how that would be.
Yeah, so I'll give a disclaimer and start by saying I'm not an expert in TBI. I can share what I know anecdotally, and I can share what I've seen. I think I mentioned one of my best friends, he was a stuntman, and he had a really bad fall, like 6 stories onto his head when he was in his 20s. And he's still recovering as well. It was about 20 or so years ago. And for him, it shows up really emotionally, and with like addiction and emotional, like the inability to emotionally regulate and addiction. So anyway, even though I'm not an expert in this, what I can tell you is that we know that meditation increases neuroplasticity, which is the brain's ability to change itself. We know that in any brain, meditation can increase both white matter and gray matter. So white matter is the corpus callosum, and that's basically the bridge between the right and left hemispheres of the brain. And so I don't know if you've ever seen, there's a beautiful TED Talk by Jill Bolte Taylor. It's called My Stroke of Insight. If you haven't seen it, I highly, highly recommend it. She's a neuroscientist from Harvard, had an aneurysm in the left hemisphere of her brain, and knew enough about the brain to sort of watch that part of the brain shut down while she shoved, all the way into her right brain.
Yeah, I actually saw that just the other day. It was on your website. So
oh yeah,
yeah,
great. And so she walks out on stage and she, shows the human brain. And I watched it, 10 years ago or 15 years ago, but it was news to me that the brain is 2 separate things. They're like 2 separate entities. The right and left hemispheres of the brain don't touch anywhere except for this corpus callosum, except for this little thin bridge. And so we've known for a long time that meditators have thicker corpus callosums than non-meditators. It's like, okay, cool party trick, but why would I want a fat corpus callosum? It's like, well, everyone should, because it's quite literally the bridge between the critical mind and the creative mind. It's the bridge between the past and future, which is left brain, and present moment awareness, which is right brain. So my hypothesis is that this short-term memory loss, you're like, oh, I knew what I was going to say, and then I got distracted and I can't recall it, or someone told me something and it slipped. Like the more those 2 hemispheres of the brain are able to dance with each other, the more elegantly you can have long-term bullets in your brain and be present moment engaging with either the person you're interviewing on the podcast or an audience in real time. So anyway, also meditation can increase the size of your hippocampus by somewhere, I think it's either 17 or 27%. And the hippocampus is in charge of emotional regulation. If you think about increasing the size of your bicep by 27%, like that's significant.
That's huge. Yeah.
Yeah, and so if you, even though the hippocampus is small, it's a tiny part of the brain. It's like, well, a 27% increase of the thing that is regulating our emotions and our hormones is a big deal. And so I think a lot of people think that meditation is just a mental technique, that it's like a cute bubble bath that you'll take when you have more time. And we've got to reframe this. We really need to get people into the headspace of no, this is the single most important piece of mental hygiene that we need to be practicing every day. Just like you're getting people to clean up their food hygiene, that they're not going to eat junk. They're going to eat real food that comes from nature at the right times in the right proportions. The same is true with our mental hygiene. And it's more important than ever, even before the pandemic, just with technology alone, like the cost of having this blue light in our eyes all day and right before sleep, but that we get cell phones in our eyes before that we see the sun, and then just the nonsense and the inane, the bulimia of garbage that goes into our brain from social media and the fear-inducing news. I mean, it's like we're all on a 24-hour-a-day junk food diet. Well, let's call it an 18-hour-a-day junk food diet, except for when we're actually sleeping. Right? And so to think that we can act this not in accordance with nature and just be feeding our brain stress-inducing things on stress-inducing devices and then not have to clean that up is a mistake, right? It's why we're seeing increase in preteen suicide rates. It's why we're seeing huge increases in anxiety and depression, and then you add on top of that a pandemic where people have been now isolating themselves. So we have the physiological ramifications of that, which we know is worse for you than smoking. And so we've just really got to ramp meditation, I think, way further up the priority list. So there's that. But specifically with TBI, the things that I can speak to are increase in neuroplasticity, which is the brain's ability to change itself. Also, it can increase neurogenesis, which is the brain's ability to generate new neurons. And we used to think that stopped in our 20s. We used to think that once the prefrontal cortex is formed, which it is around 24 or 25, that then it was just a slow decline to the grave. And nothing could be further than the truth. We can continue neurogenesis up until our 80s, provided that we have the right building blocks in place, meaning that we have enough time in nature, we're having enough sex, we're eating real food, we're meditating, we're exercising. But if any one of those pie pieces is missing, then the neurogenesis doesn't happen as quickly, effectively, or as long as it could. And so because the standard American diet and just how most adults are living, we're not in nature enough, we're not having enough sex, we're not meditating, we're not exercising enough. We're just sitting and looking at screens all day and then wondering why we're getting stupid, sick, and slow. So there's that.
Yeah, you talk in your book a lot about that it needs to be twice a day, and you even make a thing as like no more, no less, like twice a day. So what's the theory behind that?
Yeah, so that would depend on the type of meditation that you're doing. So when most people hear the word meditation, like I said earlier, they think, oh, well, which app have you downloaded? Which free app is on your phone that you aren't actually using? P.S. Downloading an app does not equal meditation. Meditation means, in my definition, accessing a verifiable fourth state of consciousness, so different than waking, sleeping, or dreaming. And also, from my definition, it means getting training in a technique that was hopefully designed for you and not designed for a monk, right? So even the apps that are around these days, even though they're super user-friendly and they're animated and they're fun and they're easy, they are derivations of practices that were made for monks. And if you're not a monk and you're trying to do monk meditation, you're likely going to think that it's hard. You're going to think that the point is to focus, that the point is to clear the mind, that the point is to not move or to not have thoughts. And that is called torture. Okay, that's like what your parents used to do to you when you were a kid to punish you. It's like, go have time out. Meditation, if you're doing it right, and if you have some training, and if you have a tool that's made for people like us, people with busy minds and busy lives, it should feel like a pleasure. You should look forward to it. It should make your life better. You should see the return on investment. It should be enjoyable, not torture, not punishment. Yeah, sometimes it's a little boring. Sure, you're addicted to your phone. Sure, you'd rather get up and have a snack. It takes some level of, you got to move past your resistance. but it's like a good exercise program. You got to move past the initial resistance, but then when you're in it, you're like, oh, I'm so proud of myself. Oh, I feel stronger. Oh, I feel better. My energy levels are higher. And I think that a lot of people are doing meditation that, one, they're not getting trained. Two, they're doing techniques that are made for monks, so it just feels like I'm just failing at this. So point of the story is that once you have a technique that's designed for you, and specifically with Ziva, we do twice a day. So first thing in the morning before coffee, breakfast, computer, and then ideally we do that second sitting at some point before the evening meal. And it would be like having, I'll equate it to coffee because that's the thing that most people are familiar with. It's like you wake up, you have your cup of coffee, and you get that hit of energy, and then it wears off, and you start to fade, and you start to hit that slump, and then you want to have the second cup of coffee in the afternoon to get you going through the day. And that's how Ziva is. I gave a talk at the Google headquarters called Why Meditation is the New Caffeine. And it was basically saying like, hey, it's going to take you the same amount of time. By the time you get up from your desk, go to the coffee shop, order your coffee, drink it, come back, you could have done a meditation. And instead of spiking your adrenals and instead of masking your brain's ability to feel tired, which is what caffeine does to you, adenosine is the chemical that your brain produces to tell you that you're tired, and caffeine blocks your adenosine receptors. So instead of masking the tiredness, which is what caffeine does, not exclusively, but it's one of the main things, instead, if you meditate, same amount of time investment, and it's sustainable, it's self-sufficient. You're giving your body rest that is 5 times deeper than sleep. And so for a 15-minute meditation, it feels sort of like an hour-long nap sitting up, but without the sleep hangover. And then you have this hit of energy and productivity to start your day. Mid-afternoon, it starts to wear off. You do that second meditation, and then again, you have the sustainable hit of energy and creativity and productivity and intuition. So you can ride that throughout your evening and night. And then here's the bonus part, is that by the time you go to sleep at night, one, you haven't caffeinated yourself into insomnia. You've also not adrenaline and cortisol yourself into insomnia. Because if you push past that fatigue, then your body will start producing adrenaline and cortisol
just to keep
going.
you awake. Right, yeah.
And that's what insomnia is. It's your body having too much stress from the day and not being able to wind down and use sleep as a time for sleep.
So you talk about in the beginning, or to not in the beginning, but to do it in the beginning of the day. So, go to the toilet, splash some water on your face maybe, and then sit down and do it before you have the coffee. Mm-hmm. I'm assuming that's because the coffee is going to find, what's the word I'm looking for? It's going to negate what you're trying to do with them. It's like the opposite effect of what you're trying to do with the meditation. But when the way you're describing it, I'm feeling like if you sit down and you do 15 minutes of meditation, you'll come out of that and not even feel like you need the coffee. Is that
that does happen for a lot of folks. Like there's no rules at Ziva, so it's not like, oh, once you start doing Ziva, you can't have coffee. And I'd say for about a third of the population, coffee is very good for them. So this is a little bit of a tangent, but I think relevant. In Ayurvedic medicine, Veda means knowledge, Ayur means longevity. So Ayurveda is an ancient science, comes from northern India, sort of the sister science to the type of meditation that I teach. And in Ayurvedic medicine, there's 3 different body types or doshas. So similar to what we learned in phys ed back in the day, there's ectomorph, mesomorph, and endomorph. Well, in Ayurvedic medicine, we call that kapha, pitta, and vata. So vata people are sort of like me, like very fast metabolism, speak really quickly, tend towards insomnia. Our nervous systems are just fast. So for me, coffee is toxic. Like nobody wants to see me on coffee. I haven't had coffee in 12 years, and this is how fast I talk, right? So for me, it's poison. For someone who is more kapha dominant, kapha is like earth and water, like Oprah, like James Earl Jones, like people just have like a gravitas about them, are kaphic people. And for people who are a bit more like of the earth, coffee can be quite good for them because it's quite stimulating. And when out of balance, those people can tend towards slowness or sluggishness or depression. And then there's pitta people, and pitta is fire. Right? And so fire is like, it can be ambition, it can be even aggression when out of balance. And pitta people can go either way with coffee. Some people it's quite good for them. Some people it can be a little too, it can make too much acid in the body. But the point of the story is that you're exactly right, is that if you wake up in the morning and have caffeine and then meditate because you've excited the nervous system, the whole point of Ziva meditation is to de-excite the nervous system. The whole point of this practice is to give the body deep healing rest. And so you're just not going to have a very fascinating meditation, and you're also not going to enjoy the high from the coffee if you immediately try to basically take a nap right after.
So you would, I had a thought. One other thing I wanted to just check with you, but it's gone. No, it's not coming back.
Okay. I trust something even better.
It is what it is, right?
Yeah.
So at our events, I've tried to introduce fun stuff for people. I had fun runs in the mornings, and I got a yoga teacher in to come and do some yoga, and even got asked to and set aside a room for people who wanted to do meditation in the morning, like at 6 a.m. before they got started. And there was a handful of people that actually went and did it, and it was great for them. But the more I'm listening to you and your book and all of that, because I got the Audible version of it, which was fun. You actually narrated that, right?
I did, yeah, I narrated it myself. I actually had to fight my publisher on that. And I was like, look, if there was ever a job that was meant for me, it's narrating my own book. Like, I used to be a voiceover artist. I used to be singing and dancing on Broadway. I used to do this for other people. I was like, I am reading my own book. Yeah. I was like, it's really hard. It's many days. It's grueling. I was like, I used to sing and dance for 11 hours a day, 6 days a week, 8 shows a week in heels. I'm pretty sure I can read my own book.
Yeah, so I think that made a big difference. I think it really did make it a lot more effective. But
right.
I was just trying to say, I think maybe introducing this as more mainstream at the event, that one way or another we try and get you to maybe do a talk and help people. So maybe do a talk on the first morning or day. And then maybe each morning for the rest of the conference, have a meditation session before we get going or something like that.
Beautiful.
Would that be fun? I think it would be.
I love this idea. And what I'd love to know from you, if we make this dream happen, would be to check in with people. Like, what was their experience without the meditation? What was their experience with it?
Correct. Or do a follow-up and make sure that we hear what they got out of it.
Yeah, because what I've found is that, meditation is selfishly very good. It's going to get your head and your heart in coherence with each other. It's going to remind you of your dreams. You're going to be able to hear your own downloads from your intuition. So that's all great, but that's still in the selfish category. But if you get an event of hundreds or thousands of people together, and then you have someone who knows what they're doing in that room, you can not only get people in coherence with their own head and heart, but you can get them in coherence with each other. And when you get the whole room vibrating on the same frequency, that's really where the magic happens. That's where the serendipity occurs. Oh my gosh, I was just thinking about someone, and then I met you. I had a dream to learn this, and then this person walked up. All that sort of inexplicable magic starts to happen when you get people into coherence. And people, even people who don't know that they're hungry for it, once they have it, they're like, oh yes, this is the thing I was looking for. I didn't know it. I was looking for my happiness outside. I didn't realize I could find it inside. Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay. So I think you're convincing me. I think it would be a like I said, I'm always trying to introduce something fun and new, and I think this would be not just fun and new, but really beneficial too at the same time. So yeah, let's talk about this. And so just when we finish up here, don't hang up, and
okay,
we can maybe talk a little bit more about how we can make that happen. Because I literally found out 2 days ago that we are more than likely, almost definitely now going to have to do an in-person one. And I say going to have to because we have a contract with the hotel that force majeure will come into effect if COVID says we cannot meet. but that's with the vaccines and all of that, that's not going to be the case. And
Okay.
so we have to have the event no matter what. We're paying for it, so we might as well have it.
Great. How many people usually come?
Well, we've had up to 600 in the San Diego one. But depending on, so currently with the current social distancing rules and that, their main ballroom where we have the event is going to be about 250
Okay.
because it's all, everyone's spread out.
Yeah.
But so we'll sell that many tickets, but as it gets closer to the time, we're hoping that those conditions might get relaxed. So if we can have people where they either have to show their little card that they've been vaccinated or they've had a COVID test like the previous week or something really soon, not that long ago, that they may allow us to reduce that social distancing distance, for instance, and allow us 400 people in the room, say.
Awesome.
So, and then we'll just, as those rules become apparent, we'll make more and more tickets available, and maybe it will get relaxed enough. I mean, August is still like 5 months away.
Wow.
So yeah, man, maybe we can get 600, and maybe if we're allowed to, we may be able to get even more than 600 in the room because everybody is so excited about the possibility of actually meeting in person again. And so this will probably be the first one in this space that gets to actually go live again and in person. So,
That would be, yeah, I feel so excited and hopeful about, people being in the room together again. And I know everyone's really hungry and missing that human connection.
yeah, and I think this, I mean, you talk about part of what you do, when you're going through this is talking about how, especially when you start, that a lot of this built up stress from your whole life needs to leave the body, and that's often difficult for some people over the first couple of weeks. But, and now with COVID and everything, it's like another order of magnitude of stress that's been added onto everybody. So,
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. Like so many of my 50,000 students, a few hundred have reached out and said like, thank you so much. I don't know what I'd be doing without this practice. This practice has saved my life. If I didn't know how I would have gotten through without it. And it's like, well, what about the 7 billion people on the planet who aren't meditating? 7.8 billion people who aren't meditating, and it's like, we're going to have some real catharsis work to do. We're going to have some real potential healing crises on our hands. And I recently heard that if 4 people experience trauma, and I'm not talking about physical trauma, I'm talking about emotional trauma now. But if 4 people experience trauma, at least one of them will have PTSD symptoms. So it was interesting because I sort of assumed that everyone that experienced trauma had PTSD, but it's not true, like specific PTSD. And it got me thinking, I'm like, well, okay, the whole world has experienced some flavor of trauma going through this, either job loss or a loss of a loved one or isolation or just any number of things. And it's like, we are not equipped. We do not have the infrastructure to help, a quarter of the world's population deal with PTSD. And so I just feel like we have to really, people who are on the path, people who've been waking up, people who've been training as coaches and meditation teachers and therapists and yoga teachers, it's like, we're going to need to really saddle up very quickly to help, those of us who perhaps haven't had access to those tools or who are suffering from PTSD in the wake of this.
Yeah. No, I think this you're going to have your work cut out for you. I really do.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so yeah, thank you so much for doing this and taking the time. I know you're really busy.
It's my pleasure.
To talk with me, and then let's talk about getting you to the event in August.
Yeah, beautiful.
Alrighty.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for the work that you do. And if people are interested in learning like what Ziva is, I'd be happy to gift your audience the first 3 days of our online course. So I do teach a technique in the book. The book is Stress Less, Accomplish More. But I also have an online course that is, I'd say it's our most popular training. It's usually 15 minutes a day for 15 days. But I'd happily give everyone the first 3 days. They can see if they like it, see if they like me as a teacher. And that's, you can find at zivameditation.com/preview. So Ziva meditation.com/preview.
I'll put that in the show notes as well. I'm really sorry. I should have. So your book, I think it's sitting there behind you as well.
Yeah, stress less, accomplish more.
Stress less, accomplish
Although
more.
all anyone can read is more. It's like, it's interesting that meditation teachers has more.
Yeah, so stress less, accomplish more, and give the website again.
Yeah, so it's zivameditation.com/preview is where you get the first 3 days for free.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much, Emily.
My pleasure.
You've been listening to an episode of the Low Carb USA podcast. You can support us on Patreon at patreon.com/lowcarbusa.